The purpose of this video is that most small end e-commerce brands don't understand that there's a threshold of spend required to actually start to see the greatest levels of efficiency within your ad account and within your overall marketing spend. There is this misconception, and I'll show you a graph in a second, that the second you launch ads, that's going to be your greatest level of efficiency, assuming that you're the best media buyer and everything is dialed in technically. And then as you start to scale spend, efficiency erodes. That's not how digital scaling actually works. And I think this misconception comes from above the line media. And why I think it comes from above the line media is that in above the line media, this is more relevant. For example, if you're going to place your products into magazines, you're going to firstly start with the most hyper-specific niche down magazine that directly translates or correlates with your target demographic. If you sell hiking boots, you're just going to place that ad in a hiking magazine with viewership just in Australia. Okay, so you're going to ensure that you're going to get the maximum return possible. Then if you want to scale your spend, you're going to have to go into more and more broad magazines, which is going to yield you a worse ROI, as it's going to be a smaller proportion of your target demographic that actually reads that magazine. And so yes, you're going to start with the best efficiency and that will linearly erode over time. It's not the case with digital. And in fact, this was a quote from someone that I was talking to a few months ago, and they were saying that you're spending enough to make yourself annoyed. And this exists in every single business. It exists in our business as well, which is that there is a certain spend threshold that you have to go beyond before you're going to start getting consistent results at an efficiency that you're happy with. Under a certain spend threshold, you're not going to get there. And so this is what people think erosion efficiency at scale looks like. So here's spend, being the yellow graph, slowly growing at the bottom. And then here's ROAS. Out of the gates, return on ad spend right away is 6. And then at a certain spend, and this spend I believe here is about 15,000, then spend starts to ROAS starts to decrease. This is unrealistic. I've never seen this in any single business ever. It always looks closer to this, which is that when you launch and you start spending, return on ad spend is actually really low. It's quite frankly terrible at the start, no matter what platform you launch on. And then as you start to ramp your spend, you start to see return on ad spend grow. Why is this the case? Why do you get better return on ad spend spending $4,000 than you do $1,000? It isn't because you get skill acquisition during that scale period. It isn't because you get any kind of learnings about what ads are working during that time of period. The main ROAS gain here is because all digital marketing platforms have machine-based placing models. So they place on users based on machine learning using conversion data. And so the more conversion data you have spinning through the machine, the better the targeting is, and therefore the better efficiency in your spend. And so this jump here is simply due to the fact that you are spending more, and so the campaigns have more data to optimize. It's quite literally that simple. And so if you are a brand right now that's spending $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month, don't think that your return on ad spend is maxed out. If you just increase spend and you do it in a way that makes sense within the context of the campaign structure, your ROAS should technically increase. And this is one of the hard things for most brand owners to wrap their head around, is that if I increase my spend, you're saying my efficiency is going to get even better? And the answer is yes. Now, only to a certain point, and you reach that point pretty quickly. Okay, so for example, referencing some smaller end brands that I've worked with, I've seen it be the case where they were spending $2,000, $3,000 at around about a 3 return on ad spend. We've come on board, and my immediate recommendation is that we need to increase spend because we're going to see better efficiencies throughout these campaigns, because these campaigns are using machine learning based bidding, which is going to be completely reliant on having more conversion data flowing through. So we've come in, immediately increased spend to $6,000, $7,000. ROAS has jumped straight to a 6, straight to a 7. And that means that revenue 4x's. And so this is one of the easiest ways to immediately multiply a small end business, is just increase spend in a way that makes sense within the context of the account. Okay, you can very easily go and do this and your account will see no incremental revenue uplift. You need to know where to put the budget. But as long as you put the budget into the right campaigns in the right way, you should see this inflection. Now, this doesn't last forever. In fact, it doesn't last very long at all. The second you reach about, in the brand's instance that I'm referring to here, about $10,000, $12,000 in spend, you pretty much hit a cap. That then maintains as you start to scale. You start to maintain about that 6 return on ad spend, and then it starts to fall away. And so during this fall period, it's really critical to understand incremental ROAS, which is something that I almost guarantee 90% of performance marketers or media buyers that work at agencies right now have no idea what incremental ROAS is, which blows my mind. Because if you're working with a brand that's in this phase of growth where they're reaching this erosion of efficiency and return on ad spend is dipping, you need to be looking at incrementality testing and incremental profitability. You should not be looking at this thing as a whole, because as you start to add on additional spend here, if you're not getting a return on revenue where the incremental ROAS is profitable, you're just stacking losses onto the P&L. And where this starts to really become an issue, and let me run you through it, right, is let's say that this brand has a 5 target ROAS, which is this line right here. They know that their business is heavily profitable if they're at a 5 ROAS or a 5 MER. And so you just keep scaling spend until ROAS dips to a 5, and then you put the foots on the brake and you stop scaling. The issue here is that if you're at this top end and you go and spend an additional $10,000 for only $5,000 in revenue return, you've increased ad spend for a 0.5 ROAS, but your overall ROAS averaged out is still above a 5. So it looks good when you're looking at averages and holistic numbers. But when you go into the actual incrementality, okay, we spent an extra 10 grand, but we only got 5 back in revenue. That's unbelievably unprofitable. We should not be making that trade. In fact, yes, I know that our target ROAS is a 5, but there's no point in going down to a 5 just to stack tens and tens of $1,000s of losses onto the P&L. And so it's important to understand if you're a smaller end brand that this exists. If you increase spend, you should actually see an increase in efficiency. Then if you're a medium-sized brand, understand that eventually you will start to see an erosion in efficiency as you scale spend. And then if you're in this phase of the business, it's really important to be dialing in on incrementality testing rather than just continuing to stack on ad spend, targeting a blended goal. A blended goal will be the biggest killer of your profitability.